That's all right. Well, I'm going to say it again. Good morning, everybody. We've been hanging out in the Zoomiverse for many, many years now, and I always feel like it's like, hey, these disembodied people in these little squares. So we are gonna do a major act of resistance with that. So I'm gonna ask if you can like raise your hands up and just wave at your people. Let them know that you got fingers, hands, arms, big, pretty smile, all the things. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for having Vanessa and I. As Lily said, we go back to 55,000 degrees to 15,000 degrees, which was the African American sort of partner to the education initiative here in Louisville. At that point, I was running a nonprofit called the Network Center for Community Change that was about making change in some of Louisville's most disinvested neighborhoods. And I tell you that not just because it's a proud piece of work that I was blessed to be able to do, but because we're actually going to do some NC3 like things while we are together today. We're going to actually get started with some of that stuff. I currently have a consulting firm, do a bunch of stuff with Strive Together around their adaptive leadership, helping them set up their what they are calling their training hub that is about continuous improvement and place-based impact. Faculty for the leadership development program inside of Casey and also the Center for Community Change. And I call myself a recovering bureaucrat. I spent several years with the state of Kentucky as deputy commissioner, director of child welfare, director of child care. All sounds really, really lovely, but God rest my mother's soul. She would say, Baby, you just can't keep a job, can you? And I'm like, I guess I can't. So now I have hung a shingle out. That shingle has been out for a little bit over 10 years as a consultant. So, a big part of what I do in leadership development and even in change initiatives like the Center for Community Investment, that is focused on creating a different investment ecosystem in disenfranchised, disinvested places, is I serve as an adaptive coach. So, when Lily reached out, it seemed like, yay, I get to talk about the thing that I love. So that is why we are here. We've got more slides than you could actually shake a stick at. Okay. And what I know is everybody is coming to this space at a different level. So you remember that arm and that hand that I asked you to wave? I'm going to ask you again. How many folks have had some sort of view into adaptive leadership? Yay. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to ask it again so I can go to the second screen. How many folks have had some dealing with adaptive leadership? Awesome. That is super helpful. So what we have prepared today is sort of like a 101. What is adaptive leadership? What are some hallmarks of adaptive leadership, especially oh, we haven't started the slides yet. Especially in change culture, like how do you make change when change is really hard? And instead of it being just sort of a sit and get, what we'd really like to do is do like little mini teaches, I call them, and then have you guys apply some of the things to your own work and your own world of change. Because guess what? The world, it is a changing and it is hard to find our footing sometime. Okay. Sound like a good thing? So what it will mean is y'all will be talking to each other, and you're going to have your first opportunity here in a minute where we invite you to go into breakout rooms. I know that may not be possible for everybody, but to the extent you can, if you can just sort of treat it as an all play. All right. So Vanessa, if you could put up the slides, that would be super duper awesome. All right, there's our welcome slide. Hopefully folks feel welcome. It is your space. Thank you for sharing space and time, allowing us to share space and time with you. So the focus for today is really twofold. We want to explore the practice of adaptive leadership as connected to change culture or trying to make change when change is hard. And we want to make sure that you all have a chance to apply some of the tools and tactics. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you as we move to the next slide that has the agenda. I promise you, we have thought a lot about the agenda. It looks like what you have in front of you. Welcome, relationships, our change infrastructure. You guys are going to do a little practice of that. We're going to dive into adaptive leadership. I'm certain you're going to have a nutritious and delicious lunch. I wish someone could come and make mine. I like a schoolie, as my kids call them, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a schoolie. We're going to then do some application with the switch framework. Hopefully people had a chance to look at that 8-minute video, and then we'll do some reflections and next steps. The agenda to me is just a guide. If y'all need something different, we'll pivot to that. A lot has happened since I put this agenda together. Even at the end of last week, the world is different. And there's lots of stuff going on in education. We're aware of that. And if there's like a, hey, Dana, can we talk about this? Then we are good to do that. Beth, can you see the slides now?
Yes,
all right.
Thank you.
Everybody good with the slides? All right. And here's what I'm going to say to you guys. I am nothing fancy. I am a blurter from way back, and I invite you to be a blurter too. If there's something, just come off mute and say the thing. Fair enough? Awesome. So the next slide really is the big thing for me. It's a fundamental belief I have, and it is also a cornerstone of adaptive leadership. It really is knowing that relationships are the infrastructure for change. People-centric, people matter. I know there's sort of a group of folks that say, oh, but it's not about the people, it's about the systems. Well, guess what? People make up the systems. And it is my fundamental belief that relationships are the infrastructure for change, and trust is the fuel for relationships. And we build trust by being together and being human together. Okay? So you guys are going to have an opportunity to lean into, and I know you have various relationships amongst you, but to just sort of lean into your person as a way of leaning into the role that you have and thinking about or being present to the work of the various systems that you serve in at your various universities and colleges, sort of within that broader education ecosystem. So this next slide, somebody come off mute. Tell me who that guy is. Who's that dude?
Joey Tribbiani.
Yeah, Joey Tribbiani.
Joey Tribbiani. And somebody in your Joey voice, read that slide for me. You can do it. I believe in you.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Was that Christopher? Was that Chris?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So we are going to delve into how you all are doing. And it is a practice from NC3, which was a community organizing nonprofit that I ran. And we did a little thing that was about what's new and good in your life, right, at the level of person. And we do that as a way to join and enter into spaces together and to sort of like take a minute and reflect, because that is a thing that is completely important as an adaptive leader, taking time to reflect and being in your own body and awareness so that you can be supportive as you execute your role. So new and good is done at the person level, right? And we do new and good really because we know what's old and crappy, right? So to just sort of stop and say, okay, what's new in my life? What's good in my life? I'm going to do an example, and then you guys are going to quickly go into breakout rooms and do the same thing. And it'll become apparent to you as to why in just a little bit. So my example, my new and good is what's new in my life is we are going to be celebrating the birth of our second grandson in July, which I'm totally excited about. And what's good in my life is I'm reading a really good book. It's The Let Them Theory, The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Maybe some of you guys have read it or are reading it. I was a little bit like, I'm not sure about this, but I actually think it's pretty good. I'm enjoying it, right? All at the level of person. Yes, I am. Oh, good, good, good. Okay, so you guys got it? What you're gonna do in breakouts? All right, I like heads nodding and thumbs up so that I know that there's a living being in those boxes. Fair enough? All right, Vanessa is going to put you into small breakout groups, and you all are going to talk for just a little bit, share the airtime, probably about 6 minutes or so. What's new in your life and what's good in your life? Have fun. As Vanessa moves you around, if you have questions or you need to blurt something, feel free to do so. And I know that JC Gregory said that he's doing double duty in another meeting. And not sure about Kim. Okay, JC opted.
I am just standing in for Rebecca Johnson from Southeast Community College. She's in another meeting as well, so I'm just kind of taking notes and just stepping back and just listening today.
All right, thanks for being here, Kim.
Thank you.
I'll
And
go
feel-
join that room 5 where JC and Katie are.
Okay, thank you, Lily.
Yep.
Vanessa, do you want to go ahead and give them?
Yeah, and then she just did it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start bringing them back now. It's counting down.
All right, welcome back. We've got one group, maybe two. More folks are coming. As a trainer facilitator, when folks are in breakout rooms and, you know, they're just sort of slowly staggering back, I get to tell myself, hey, those conversations were rich and robust and fun.
County over that falls in different regions. Great examples like Lincoln Trail, which is at 8 counties surrounding Elizabethtown, has no adult.
So I think we are all back here. How was new and good? I see smiles, some thumbs up. So new and good was good? All right, what I'd love to do is maybe hear from a couple of folks about what'd you notice? What kind of themes are similarities, differences came up for your room? And if you're a person who doesn't like to share out loud, please, 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 the chat is live and just put your information in the chat. So new and good, a little sense making. What happened? What'd you hear?
We talked a lot about family and trips, upcoming trips. But a lot about family.
Family, trips. Was that true for other groups? Yeah, personal lives. What's going on in personal lives?
Nobody said this specifically, but there's a lot of compartmentalization.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I specifically said my personal, here's what's good in my personal. The outside is a completely different ball game right now with everything going on. So, I was specifically stating the good things were personal to me. Outside is a little bit different. So,
Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
in that regard, we kind of all agreed without calling it that.
gotcha. Contain to maintain. All right, let's hear from like voiceover from maybe one or two other people?
Our group talked about, using our being more conscientious about how we're spending our money and et cetera. And being resilient in terms of, using what we have to make delicious meals. Everyone's going to move in with Ariane because she is because she is making some very, very yummy things. So yeah, just being innovative and flexible with what we have, and also using our money to make statements.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Hey, Vanessa, can I get you to take the slides down and then we'll start at the at slide 8, but I just want to see faces really quickly. So you guys, the cool thing about new and good is, again, it allows us to sort of lean into knowing, right? Knowing ourselves, being aware of when it's really hard to access new and good because, right, the old tapes are old and crappy and dusty and have been replayed so much that if you're my age, you know that like the tape part of the cassette gets a little worn and thin, right? Because it's just a replay, replay, replay. But more importantly, as an adaptive leader, when you're working with a group, what it begins to surface is, what are folks' values? Where are the interests? What might be some of their competing commitments, right, in their person and the strain between person and role? It is a really nice joining piece, but it gives you a lot of data. And when you are in a change environment and you are practicing adaptive leadership, friends, you are a learning machine and you are a data machine. So just with this little snippet that you guys did, if we were going to say one or two things about the personality of this group, interest and values, what would you say one or two of those might be? And you've got them in the chat, right?
Seems like there's a lot of work around work-life balance and how we, somebody else said compartmentalization, how we carve out space for family while we're also thinking about the stresses at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And change is afoot. And people are trying to find their footing with the change. There is a thread of, yeah, and things are going on. And guess what? I like to trip, right? I'm going to find a way to have some joy and some fun as well. All right. So new and good, you guys feel connected? What I hope to do is give you things that you can, we have a saying around here, oh, I can use that on Tuesday, right? That you can take it and use it next Tuesday, whether it's with a group of colleagues or a group of students that you are working with, or parents or whomever, okay? Learning machine, lots of data coming your way. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. So Vanessa, if we could throw the slides back up. It is time to continue because we've already actually begun exploring the practice of adaptive leadership. You just did your first practice, but what I'd like to do is get into the nuts and bolts of adaptive leadership. The thing that I want to call to your attention is that third word down. And somebody come off mute and just tell me what that third word is.
Practice.
Practice. And honestly, if I could take that word and make it blink on the slide, that is exactly what I would do. Because leadership is a practice. It is iterative and it is ongoing. And when you take up the mantle of adaptive leadership, what you are signing on for is iteration, doing a thing, learning about a thing, working with folks when you would rather be like, I'm all peopled out, right? Learning from what you're doing and then doing it again. Slowing down. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, it doesn't mean get so slow that you're like, the system sloth, but it does mean that you are being thoughtful in ways that take into account interests, values, beliefs, losses, and risk. Okay? So next slide. Because I feel like if I don't do fancy talk about what adaptive leadership is, I will have missed the mark. So adaptive leadership is really a model that's used to encourage people to adapt in order to deal with challenges and change. And if I were North House 2016, I would put the word transition in there. People push against change, but the real rocky, choppy stuff is in transition. Okay. Next slide. Well, let's put the bullets in. So adaptive leadership. What's up with adaptive leadership? How's it different than leaders who are more leaned into technical aspects? Well, adaptive leadership moves away from the conventional top-down approach. When you are practicing adaptive leadership, particularly in a change environment, your stance is one of the people with the problem are also the people who can solve the problem. Very different than a hierarchical approach where there's an edict, a declaration, here we go, right? It's different than I said so. It's different than, oh, here's the problem, here's my fix. It's actually standing with, valuing, connecting, creating space and time to be with others in the problem, and a belief that people who are most proximate to the issue are also the folks who can help solve the issue. Adaptive leadership requires sort of being okay in the gray. And not only being okay in the gray, but being good at surfacing and noticing ambiguity and ambivalence, and being able to really click in to the nuances of change, right? Sometimes there's a big change and folks focus on the big change, but with that big change can come lots of little changes along the way, right? Little bumps before or bumps along the road to the bigger change. When one is practicing adaptive leadership, it requires flexibility, having sort of a penchant, if you will, for leaning into complexity and things being okay with things being a little unpredictable. So adaptive leadership is not a 1 + 1 = 2. It's just not that. It's not that clear. It requires You may think, hey, this problem requires the addition of 1 + 1 = 2. But the more you learn, it may be more like, oh, absolutely, we're not even doing addition. Some kind of way we're doing geometry, right? So you're sort of learning as you're going and pivoting and flexing. Now, even though flexibility is there, a dear friend of mine says, hey, we should be flexible, but not flimsy, right? So you still want to have some structure there. In a culture that embraces adaptive leadership, it also embraces innovation and learning. I would dare say has some tolerance for failure. And it's anchored in collaboration. And through that collaboration, folks are willing to test things, right? Take a chance, risk. Okay, next slide. So all those bullets, good folks, really roll up to this slide. At the heart, adaptive leadership is the process of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and to thrive. And we can get these slides to you. I see people writing. So I want to talk a little bit about that word thrive, if I might. Over the last few, well, I'm going to say really over the last decade in community change and systems change, that has been a word that has been sort of thrown around. Hey, we want communities to thrive. We want students to thrive, all of that. And I am so here for it. I want to make sure that we are level set when we're talking about how this word is being used when it comes to adaptive leadership and change culture. Thriving here is really coming out of sort of a organism evolutionary perspective, regardless of what you think about it. It really is sort of drawing the metaphor analogy from that particular sector. Right here, and in adaptive leadership, thriving really talks about we want to preserve the parts of the part of the DNA that is essential for the organization or the system to survive. Discard, rearrange, or re-regulate the DNA that's no longer useful or serves the organization, and create new arrangements of DNA that give the organization or the system the ability to flourish in new ways and in a challenging environment. Let's just stay on this slide, Vanessa. Right? So this is like really super important because at the bedrock of adaptive leadership and change culture, it is about preserving legacy stuff that works. I've talked about loss before, right? Those rearrangements and those re-regulations may create a sense of loss, not just for the system or the organization writ large, but for your colleagues in their roles, right? Your innovation might create loss for them. And then you're putting together new arrangements in the organization that are going to meet the moment. Okay? Everybody with me? I know it's a lot of information coming your way. Okay. Let's go ahead. So, as an adaptive leader, thing one is really being able to distinguish technical from adaptive challenges. And Vanessa, let's just sort of stop, can we stop the slide share? I know I'm probably making you crazy with that, but I want to see some faces here. So thing one, knowing the difference between an adaptive, a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge. I went back and I listened to some of the modules that you guys have done prior to this one. And man, it was so much adaptive stuff in there. And you guys actually were deep in some adaptive work and talking about those differences. And I was like, I wonder if they know that they are leaned in, clicked into tenets of adaptive leadership. Okay. So this is not a quiz, it is a question. And that is, what do you all believe to be the difference between a technical challenge and adaptive challenge? And please just come off your, unmute and blurt. You don't have to get it right. There is no right, there's only learning.
I feel like maybe the technical challenges would be more based on maybe, for lack of a better term, things that we have access to, and whether it's the technology or the infrastructure, where adaptive challenges, I think, sometimes can be more in our head. It's a hunch.
Thank you. Hey, that's good. I love that. How about others?
I feel like technical challenges to me remind me of like hard skills. Remember, I'm in career services, so this is just how my mind thinks. But like hard skills, like you can teach people how to do hard skills versus the adaptive type of challenges would be more like the soft skills sort of thing, and kind of maneuvering and massaging things into place. It's not a insert tab A into slot B kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Matt. Right, it's a lot of y'all and one of me and teeny tiny names in the Zoom box. Right, so let's do this. Vanessa, if you could bring up that slide to show folks exactly how on point they are. Way to go. All right, so here's the deal. And the stuff at the top really is like the take home, right? The headline. Technical challenges have known solutions. They have known solutions. They're usually solved by an authority figure or an expert. They oftentimes are either programmatic, right? Matt, you were talking about hard skills. I think about like an electrician. If the fuse blows, then you do this. Oops, may not be that fuse. So it may not be linear. The fuse blew, I put another one in, we're good. It might be the fuse blew, I put another one in, it didn't work, doggone it, this fuse is bad, let me go get another one. But we know that the solution is a new fuse, right? There's a known solution that an expert or a technician or someone with authority can fix. We are agreed upon not only the problem, but the solution. The problem, the fuse blew. The solution, let's get another one, right? It really is sort of A plus B equals C. Even if there's a glitch, there's a known solution. With technical challenges, it is the formal authority or structural authority that does the work, has the experience to make the work happen. Usually, folks' worldviews and power structures are not threatened. And we don't need to mix anything up or change anything. Okay. On the other side, are adaptive challenges. Adaptive challenges, the hallmark here is they don't come with a manual, and there's no expert to call to put the new fuse in. So no known solution, or if there is a solution, there's not the capacity to access it or implement it right now. Exactly. I'm reading the chat about clear, complicated, and complex ecosystems, right? These adaptive challenges tend to be complex, messy, very, very rooted in social dynamics and interpersonal stuff. The idea here is that it's gonna take getting to values, beliefs, innovation, challenging old assumptions and habits, while keeping in mind change and loss. Okay? Technical, known solution. Might even be complex, complicated and complex, but there's a known solution. The data system goes down, it's a bummer, folks are teed off, and somebody comes and it can be fixed. Right? Students are not having a deep sense of belonging. There may be some things you can try, but there's not, and there may even be a best practice, but it's not the same thing as fuse out, fuse in, right? You're going to have conversations amongst yourselves with them and others about the habits of the organization, assumptions about students, values, belief, right? What are the losses that can be tolerated? What are the innovations that can be tried? I want to pause for a second. Does this make sense? Yes? No, maybe so. All right, I see a thumbs up. So I'm going to keep on trucking. Let's go to the next slide. So, my friends and leaders, here's the deal. You know you're dealing with an adaptive challenge if some of these things are present, okay? And we'll go through them. I just want to say that for me, as a leader for over 38 years, I wish I had known this when I first started or whatever. I wouldn't have so many dents in my head, right? Because you know you're dealing with an adaptive challenge when it feels like head meet wall, head meet wall, head meet wall, right? This challenge is having a birthday. It's a perennial challenge. I'm frustrated. I feel all the feelings, okay? I want to just sort of take a moment and run through these. And I'm going to ask you guys to interact with me. Cool beans? Everybody know where the thumb emoji is on the Zoom? If this sounds like something you've experienced, just sort of put your thumb emoji up. If you don't know where the thumb emoji is, we're going to act like we might be in a faith circle and just wave your hand. All right? People would rather avoid or deny an issue. Does that resonate? The daggone problem just keeps happening. I think I solve it, and then it rears its ugly head again. Ooh, it sure is uncomfortable at work. Doing the work is uncomfortable. There are competing priorities, and there's no resolve for them. What are we supposed to be doing? My plate is full. And as my granny would say, I need a sideboard to put everything on. What are the priorities? Because we're trying to do everything, nothing's getting done. Here's my favorite. There's cordial hypocrisy. And that is fancy talk for, we say we're all good, but we not really. I just can't say to you what I really think. And nobody's doing that. If I'm on your street, just wave your hand or put your little thumb emoji up. Moving forward feels too risky. I can see what the new shore should be. We can see as the people who are closest to the challenge, but I'm not going to say anything because what if it doesn't work? There may be casualties, meaning real loss, right? For this change, this transition to happen, people may feel like they might lose their spot. They might lose their expertise. They might be seen as an obstructionist. Oh, maybe I may be the casualty because I don't know how to do this new thing. Folks have to work across boundaries, and we're really used to working in silos. It may feel swirly. The work has to be done by people closest to the problem. We don't usually invite those folks in because we hold the knowledge. Is that making sense to you all? Yeah. So, Vanessa, can we take the slides down? I want to see faces. How you guys doing out there? Those things resonate? So you think you've bumped up against some adaptive issues?
Very much so.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Cool. Yay. But guess what? You guys are going to be all girded up with adaptive practices to sort of step in. All right, Vanessa, slides. So you guys know those 2 a.m. infomercials when they say, but wait, there's more. Or maybe that's just me that's awake at 2 a.m. So with adaptive leadership, it really is, but wait, there's more. If only problems were either technical or adaptive. But the reality is they're not. Usually they're hybrid or what we call mixed, okay? So when you're able to spend some time with the slide deck, we want to invite you to really look at this slide because chances are, even with the hand raising and the hand emoji and you thinking about the problem with the profile or the characteristic of what I just went through, my big hunch is your issue, your challenge is probably mixed, right? It's a little bit country and it's a little bit rock and roll, okay? It's got little aspects of the technical and it's got aspects of the adaptive here. So these problems, you want to tease out which parts are technical, where can I call the expert, which parts are adaptive, right? Where do I need to be flexing my adaptive leadership muscle, which we're going to talk about how to build that muscle in just a moment. But the takeaway here is that those hybrid problems really require lots of learning and discovery. And to be thoughtful about the marriage of folks who are addressing the problem. Because you don't just need the electrician to change the fuse. You're going to need the electrician and the homeowner, right? You're going to need that expert and you're going to need the folks who are most proximate to the issue. And sometimes those things can be like, you know, I don't know, cats and mice living together, right? It's really, really hard. There tends not to be a lot of joining and generation in those relationships. So the work of the adaptive leader is to create that joining between the two. All right. I'm gonna pause. And Vanessa, if we could just take the slides down for a sec. I just want to hear from you all. How's this landing? I see heads nodding and all that. You can put it in the chat. You can.
Sense. I mean, it's really helpful right now, especially with, I'm sure I'm not the only one kind of thinking of what Friday's going to look like with the mandate and the Dear Colleague letter, to really see how it's so much intertwined in terms of technical things that we need to do, but also some, negotiations of what other things may look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Sarah has in the chat pretty intuitive, right? It reminds me of nothing about us without us. All of those things are true too. And the thing, I'm going to just tell you guys, Vanessa's probably going to be like, we didn't discuss you doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So there is a book, and I'll make sure that Lily gets it. It's called The Practice of Adaptive Leadership. And I love, love, love this book. As you can see, I love this book with all the, tabs and all of that. And the reason that I love it is, to Sarah's point, it's very intuitive. Adaptive leadership is actually for many folks. And what this book does, and what I think adaptive leadership and particularly in the, I don't know, in the pursuit of change does, is it makes some of the things that are implicit or tacit to us much more explicit, and things that we can practice, and it gives us language. Right? I don't know about you guys, but you learn something, you're like, oh, that's what they call it. Right? Adaptive leadership is sort of like that too. Right? Like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm paying attention to loss. I'm paying attention to beliefs and values. Right? I'm going to the balcony, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, and I'm observing patterns. I'm naming whether my challenge is technical or adaptive. Why does that matter? Because if you have a technical challenge, or if you have an adaptive challenge that you are treating as a known problem that you can fix, and it's adaptive, I promise you, those dents that I told you I have from head, meet, wall, you will have them too. The adaptive complexities of a problem will eat the technical challenge for breakfast every day of the week that ends in Y. Every day of the week. Okay? So it helps you in your approach. So let's sort of get into why adaptive challenges are so dang hard. And I would invite Vanessa to put our slides back up. So there are reasons adaptive challenges are so dang hard. And to get back to the, oh yeah, that makes total sense. There are things that we know, but if we don't have them in the forefront, we can sort of trip over ourselves and trip over our leadership, particularly when we're trying to make needed change, big scaled change, things of that nature. Okay. So remember at the top of our time together, we talked about thriving and DNA and adaptations. Well, one of the reasons that the practice of adaptive leadership can be challenging is because those new adaptations and those regulated pieces or rearrangements of that old DNA, people don't tend to want that, right? It requires people to change. And there's a thing out there, and perhaps you guys have heard of it in your work, your leadership work. It's called immunity to change. And we all have immunity to change in our person, in our roles, and systems have the same thing. It's sort of like a change comes in, and then there's a counterweight that pushes it out. Knowing that is so important, right? Understanding that those re-regulations and those adaptations that require people to change also generate that perceived or real loss. Adaptive challenges are grounded in, as I've said before, complexity, values, loyalties, and they stir up emotions. Versus if we come in with a technical piece, it tends to hold at bay, like the emotions, and can be almost considered a dispassionate analysis, right? Some of us may think that that's happening right now, right? There's emotion stirred up, but it's being met with a dispassionate analysis or dispassionate acts. In adaptive leadership, you got to be you're the holding container, if you will, for the awareness of those emotions. It's not your job to regulate anyone else's emotions, but it is understanding that there are emotions and that it is a false narrative that you can decouple your person and your role and the emotions that the person has, right? False narrative. We've talked about loss, right? And by loss, we mean, again, that change, it's not like, you know, I'm going to take my ball and go home loss. But it really is, if you think about some of the big change initiatives that you've been a part of, they come with loss, real and perceived. It might be loss of expertise. Oh, this change, I have to learn something all over again. People saw me at the top of the heap in my organization, but I'm losing expertise. I might be, or they might be, losing status, losing autonomy, losing name. You could, it could go on and on. Okay. This piece about one person's innovation can cause another person to feel incompetent, betrayed, or irrelevant. Folks are like, rearrange me not. I'm good. Thank you. I know what I'm doing. So when you are thinking with an adaptive headset on, there are going to be predictable defensive patterns, both at the individual level and at the system level. You can expect it because it stirs up different emotions. Okay. So here's what we'd like to do. If we could go to the next slide. We are going to have a pause and apply. All right. So Vanessa, can you drop in the chat what the ask is going to be? And this is an individual piece of work. And if we could just see faces. So folks, I know people are in different, some folks are in an office. I know people are doing double duty between meetings and things of that nature. But if you can, on a piece of paper, and if you're unable to write on a piece of paper, just think about it. Spend a little time. I call it in solitary reflection. Write on a piece of paper, like 3 of the challenges you are wrestling with in role. Okay. Now, here is the deal. I know the ecosystem is very, I'm trying to find the right word, in flux and shifting. And some of those things are like incoming. Most of those things are probably like incoming. So if you could keep your challenge not at that level, but things that you are trying to do on campus, things that you guys are trying to do as a leadership exchange group. What are some of the challenges of the moment in your role that you're trying to meet that you yourself in role are spearheading? Okay. So write down maybe 3 of those challenges. Then note whether you believe that challenge to be a technical challenge, an adaptive challenge, or a hybrid challenge. And why? It's technical because I can call the plumber and he or she can plunge, whatever, right? Or it's adaptive because of these kind of complexities, this kind of loss, or it's hybrid. These are the technical parts, these are the adaptive parts. Okay. Right. That last bullet is just what I said, like, okay, if it's adaptive, what's the loss people might be perceiving, pushing back against? What kind of values, beliefs, loyalties, or competency might be at play with your challenge? All right. So what we're going to do is take the slide down, get to faces, and you guys are going to spend, it's really a quick jot, like 5 to 6 minutes with this. Okay. So lean into identify the challenges, because this should be applicable to your work. That's the only way it's useful. All right. So go ahead, turn your camera off. And when you are done, signal me. Let me know by turning your camera back on. Awesome. Thank you. A little less than 2 minutes left. Right, I see folks starting to come back. Nice. Beautiful, beautiful. More cameras on. We're nearly all back. All right, wherever you got to is absolutely fine. The invitation is to turn your camera back on and be in community. Very nice. Okay, so folks able to identify some challenges? I see some nods. Anybody want to share a challenge?
I'd like to. So part of KCTCS has a student success survey that we send out to students. So I pull the results on Wednesdays and share them with our team, but it's good to know what's hurting how our students need help, but we don't always have ways to address the issues. So I feel like that's a challenge that we're facing. Like our students are dealing with homelessness, transportation, and childcare. And those are the three things that every week when I see that come through, I don't know how to, we just don't have the resources to help them. So I was thinking that was like hybrid because it's really changing the mindset of our area and community. And then just really getting down and doing the work too, finding the places that are willing to, I don't know, take in students, and we just don't have that in our area. It's we're rural, and we have 4 campuses that are an hour apart from each other. So we can't even really band together sometimes and come up with solutions. So that was this morning, right before our meeting. So that's, right at the top of my brain.
That is definitely an adaptive challenge, right? And if we had probably another couple of hours and a little bit different of a talk, we could really do some thinking about deeply. Because remember, this is like building awareness of adaptive challenges, think 101. But to delve deeply about what is the implication and how is the system reacting or not reacting, and what mental models are afoot, particularly around resources, resource allocation, innovation, partnership. We would dive really, really deeply in some of that stuff, but certainly an adaptive challenge. Okay, this is listing and identifying, and we're about to move to archetyping them. Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Maggie, for sharing that.
And yes, I saw Kasha's message. Or no, she sent it right to me. Never mind. I'll message her back.
Anybody else want to share? Just what's on your mind? Not asking for a solution, just what challenges are you wrestling with? I never say struggling with, by the way, because struggle feels like I'm the victim of the challenge, but wrestling, you're active and you've got agency and you are in it. So what might be another challenge that folks are wrestling with?
I'm wrestling with trying to improve success rates for our lowest level of developmental reading and writing students. The challenge is complicated because we know best practices that the students took the classes on campus were engaged, and maybe we're also required to enroll in college success course at the same time. We could increase those success rates. But all of those things require a complete campus culture change. Potential loss of enrollments, which means loss of performance-based funding. So it's the constant battle of enrollment versus success. And it's just a constant battle.
Right. And
so we know the answers. We do know some of these answers. We know if your priority is success, these are things that need to be done. But that isn't enough. Just knowing answers aren't enough, because even if you build it, you can't get the students to do it. You got to have the whole culture of the institution on it. So it's just this pervasive challenge. And so we try to nitpick at it and do little bitty changes here and there. And it's just very frustrating.
Yeah, I see lots of heads nodding for sure. So my hunch is that similar challenges, are sort of cutting across the grass here. Right? Maybe a little bit different, but like, hey, this has been a perennial kind of challenge that if we did what we know to do, it would be helpful. It may not be the big S solve, but it would certainly help. So what's in the way of that? Okay. All right. How y'all doing out there? That's in my Erica Badu voice, if you know Erica Badu. Okay, folks, okay? Y'all rolling with me? You hanging in? Okay, awesome. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is, keep those challenges in front of you. And as I said, we're not delving into the solve for today. We're delving into is it technical? Is it adaptive? What kind of adaptive challenge is it? What does it require on me to step in to solve, not the solution? And I appreciate, Lily, what you put in the chat about an opportunity. Sounds like, when is it, in April? To do some things that will dig deeper on actual solutions, which just tickles me, because what I love about that is you'll be able to pull some of the stuff from this session and hopefully bring it into that session, right? As sort of undergirding your knowledge or how you're holding the challenge, okay? So what I'd like to do is keep us rolling. I know we've got a little bit of time between now and lunch. And I want to squeeze everything in that I can possibly squeeze in. Okay. All right. So you've done your pause and apply. You guys now have your list of challenges that you are wrestling with, you are grappling with. Most folks, my hunch is they were either hybrid or adaptive, that they really weren't super duper technical. where you just need to call somebody or get an expert. Because what I know about most leaders, and I will say especially if they are hanging out with Lily, is if in fact it was, I need to call somebody, you would have called them by now, right? So it's probably an adaptive challenge or a mixed hybrid challenge. So the thing about adaptive challenges is they tend to fall into 4 archetypes. And I'd like for us to dive into those and talk a little bit about them. Again, this is not, I always hate this phrase, but I'm going to say it, like rocket science. It is, they might be things that are sort of in the way back of your mind, but I just want to bring them to the forefront. So adaptive challenges tend to fall into 4 buckets or have 4 archetypes. I'm going to read them and then we can talk a little bit about them for sure. So the first is that there's a gap between espoused values and actual behaviors. So in real people talk, we say people are not walking their talk, right? So an example of that might be, oh, we say we value student input, but we actually need to, we say we value student input and we want students involved in the decision-making process. And all of our meetings are gonna be at, I don't know, pick a time, 11:30. I know none of you all would do that, right? But an example of your values and your behaviors or in the community space, it would be, we say that we really value resident voice, but our behavior is to have the meeting at 3:30. Okay. Competing commitments. And we talked about that a little bit earlier on, that there are so many things that are happening in the system that it's like they are sort of jockeying and against each other. So it can also look a little more nuanced than that. I'm part of a lot of philanthropic efforts and a lot of work with public systems across the country. And many of those public systems or some of the nonprofits that philanthropy is working with, there are these competing commitments. Hey, we really want this to be driven by the people who are most proximate to the issue. Oh, and we also want that report by the end of the second quarter. Right? So there's a commitment by the nonprofit to engage students, engage families, what have you, public sector, philanthropy, really holding a time boundary and committed to that, which they're jockeying against each other. The third is speaking the unspeakable. And this sort of goes back to that cordial hypocrisy thing that we talked about. But this challenge is where there are things that everybody is thinking, but nobody says them, right? Folks don't speak the unspeakable. Is it Kasha? I'm sorry, I can't see your face or your name on this screen. But
Yes.
you said, hey, we know what to do. My hunch is people have spoken that before, and some may continue to speak it. Others who have heard it spoken don't speak it anymore because there may be a belief that it doesn't matter anyway, right? But nobody's saying, I'm not going to, pipe up here because it's fallen on deaf ears and I feel this way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually both, even it's also competing commitments. It's the commitment between enrollment and success.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the unspeakable is, well, we have to offer every opportunity with every modality, even if it's not really in the student's best interest. But we're not allowed to really say that. So yes.
Yeah. So you can see those archetypes really threaded through. And then the fourth archetype is work avoidance. And Kasha and others, I am certain that there is work avoidance. Not because your system is bad, good, or otherwise, but whenever you have an adaptive challenge, it's hard. The work of thinking and the work of untangling and the work of stepping into loss and values and beliefs, it's hard. And its systems can unknowingly, and we in roles can unknowingly step into work avoidance, right? And work avoidance is exactly what it sounds like. We are distracted. We attend to all the things except for the thing that needs to be attended to. It can also look like, and maybe this doesn't happen where you are, and it's just the systems that I work in. It's like, oh, got it. Same meeting, different day. That could have been an email, right? It's the swirl of the system attending to secondary tasks instead of primary tasks. Are these things resonating with you guys?
Yes, just had that meeting yesterday.
All right. All right, let's go to the next one, the next slide. But here's the deal. All hope is not lost. There are things that can be done in terms of the challenges as they fall into these archetypes. I'm not going to go completely through this slide because I want to leave a little time for us to have a conversation and dig a little bit more into work avoidance. But you can see, like, when there's a gap between a spouse's values and behaviors, right? It requires honestly assessing where time is spent versus stated values. Now, that writes real well on a slide. And in real life, it can be hard because someone has to do the leaderly work of not only noticing it, but naming it to the system and also helping lead the system through this. Okay. Each one of these has some things that, as an adaptive leader, you want to keep in mind. I promise you that these are not plug and play. And if you do this, it's rainbows, unicorn, and cotton candy. It actually is hard work. Speaking the unspeakable, right, really requires creating an environment where it is normalized to speak hard things without fear of retaliation, rejection, and not being tagged as the person who is holding the valence for speaking those things. And what does that mean? That means that nobody says the thing. We just depend on Vincent to say it, right? Because that comes at a cost too. You guys with me? Work avoidance. Let's sort of dig into work avoidance. It seems like, and I love this little thing. It's like, oh, I'm blind to my work. Work avoidance is a big thing in systems, and it's a big thing in role, and it's a big thing that we can sometimes do in person. I don't know about you guys, but my business partner and I, we laugh all the time because it's like whenever a grant is due, all of a sudden my whole house needs to be dusted and vacuumed. Like I can't get to that until I absolutely have to dust and vacuum first. Anybody else sort of like that? Yeah, I see Patty raising her hand, right? It's like you do the secondary or tertiary task instead of doing the thing that needs to be done, right? So let's sort of get into work avoidance really quickly. So these are some things to note, right? Because as an adaptive leader, remember I said you're a learning machine and you're a data machine. You are like clicking into your observations, you are clicking into the data that you take in, and you are making meaning of that data. So work avoidance in systems with groups, with teams, looks like a focus only on the technical parts. We can call the people and they will fix this. That's great. That is fixed, but your actual issue isn't, right? It's sort of like if you think about your house and you have a leak in the roof, instead of attending to the leak in the roof, you call the painter to put the kill stain remover up and you paint the ceiling, but you don't attend to the root cause of the leak. Turning down the heat, that is not the HVAC. That really is when you know, which is a big part of adaptive leadership, ginning up conflict in service of the result, like productive conflict, or continuing to push. Work avoidance looks like you know you need to push, you know you need to say the thing, you know you need to keep the heat up on the issue, but you turn it down and you choose comfort over truth. Right? Clearly denying the problem exists or creating a proxy fight. When groups are really charged with a tough issue, a change issue, be mindful that if you as the leader and you're holding an adaptive stance, it's like it's about A, B, and C. And these side issues keep happening that are about E, G, and broccoli, right? Those are proxy fights. And that is a form of actual work avoidance and decentering the primary task or the primary challenge. So as an adaptive leader, your work is to notice it and name it. Okay. Work avoidance looks like, oh, we couldn't possibly do that because we have always behaved or had these kinds of programs in place or practices in place, honoring the legacy behaviors or legacy roles. And I won't go through the other bullets, but I would invite you to like really, really dig into those. So what I'd like to do is have another pause and apply moment, but let's do it as a full group. And Vanessa, if you could just get us to faces, that would be super duper awesome. How's all this landing on you? See these archetypes in the problem that are problems you identified? Thank you for the thumbs up, Sarah. Kasha. I can see JC nodding his head. What you thinking about out there? I have 3 boys. I'm really used to silence.
I have so many funny stories that are can't believe they're real when you think about the work avoidance. I mean, just one yesterday, if I could protect the innocent or guilty and sharing with you all at some other point, I would, about someone avoiding work and doing something. I'll leave it there versus doing hard things that we really need them to do. And they did something else that will probably wind them, getting some behavioral issues, right, from that because they're avoiding something hard. But, today I can find the humor in it. Yesterday, I think people were mad, but today I'm like, oh my goodness. But the root of it is the work avoidance for tackling the hard things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Stephanie, thank you for what's in the chat.
It really kind of, Dana, makes me think about the role of the leader in really seeing these things and then centering them, or, calling them and naming them, like you said. And that is really that's a difficult role to play when ultimately you're trying to still move us all forward in some regard. Like maybe we're not going to hit that, touchdown, whatever, but maybe we'll get a field goal, so you still want to keep the partners engaged and not just piecing out and being like, well, never mind, if there's no like requirement for people to be there doing a thing, it's all kind of collaborative, voluntary engagement. So it is still challenging, I guess, to set this positive approach to why we want to like really have a compelling purpose for why we're together, and some of that foundational work of building trust among the partners and really agreeing on what it is that we're really trying to do, so that when you do see these other not very productive, work avoidant type of activities bubbling up, like hopefully as a leader, you can redirect or keep the focus on the real important thing. I know that that's hard in some of the groups that I'm leading. I know from a campus perspective, you've got ecosystem of partners that have different interests, maybe it's academic affairs and career development trying to work together, and there's maybe not a huge history of that happening at your institution. I don't know, but you're trying to build that relationship and become more integrated. But even at the state level of trying to bring different institutional partners together that have a similar challenge or a similar priority, but we still kind of have maybe a preference for just kind of, well, this is how I'm doing it. It's working okay for me, but like, well, what if we think about our shared student, or I don't know. It's hard to be this leader. Like this is a really high level, I feel like, ability and skills to bring into facilitating any kind of group. So it's just really resonating with me.
Yeah, and Lily, thank you for that. And hey, gang, honestly, that beginning, the practice, it is a practice. A friend of mine, Jenny Jean Davidson, some of you all may know her, she leads the neighborhood house here in Louisville. She says you don't have to get there grown, right? You don't have to get there grown. There are small steps and you can practice, right? My coaching invitation to you is not to start with the hardest stuff. Hey, John, that's work avoidance. Yeah, maybe not so much, right? But for you to know it in your role, oh, okay, what's underneath that, right? Let's just, Vanessa, can you go to slide 22 really quickly? We're jumping out of order. I know you're probably mortified. Oh my God, 22, she's on slide 22. And there are 48 more. No, I'm just joking. Let's hit 22. The next one. So here's what tends to happen as leaders, right? Just leaders in general, whether it's addressing an issue in a system or some leaders, not all, issues with the person with work avoidance or the team or whatever the challenge is. We observe it. Oh, something's going on. There's something that needs to be fixed. And then hit me with the arrow, Vanessa. We go straight to intervene. Because how many folks on here with me are doers? You fancy yourself a doer. You don't let grass grow under your feet, right? And that has served many of us well. We see a thing, we fix a thing, we intervene, we go to act. What adaptive leadership is asking you to do is to slow down. Let's hit that next slide. Same circle, but to slow down. Observe, right? And in the observation, what's really going on? From my perspective, from their perspective, perspective taking. You might be right. You also might be wrong, right? So you're going to move to interpretation, again, through various perspectives. Slow down, make a hypothesis, right? What else might be true about this problem, about whatever is going on with the team or a colleague enrolled? You're going to get curious. You might even ask some questions. Hey, one of the things I've noticed is that our primary task is to X, Y, and Z. It feels to me like when we approach this, the team, you, me, X, Y, does A, B, and C. I'm curious, how do you see it? What do you think is going on? And those are conversations that usually, because we're doers, we are, flying on 50 to get a thing done as opposed to step back and interpret. Okay. And then we act. Exactly. Yes, JC, I agree. Right. And sometimes it's what can I test? You don't have to go full bore. What small changes can I make? I'm going to learn a thing and then I'm going to act again. And everybody doesn't have the same muscle, but to surround yourself with colleagues that they've got where you're thin and you've got where they're thin, right? It's not a solo dolo practice. It is a practice that you are implementing and operationalizing with others. Okay? Make sense? All right, let's go back to the faces, Vanessa. All right. So we're about 2 minutes out from lunch. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do when we come back. We're going to finish up with we've done here's what it is. Here's the difference between technical and adaptive. Here's what to know about why adaptive problems can be so dang hard. Elements of adaptive problems. Archetypes, being aware of those. And when we come back, we're going to do 2 things. First, well, 3. We're going to do 3 things after your nutritious and delicious lunch. Answer questions that may be coming to you or may come to you over lunch. We're going to talk about, as a leader, what are some of the concrete things that you can do to advance adaptive work? All is not lost. Is it hard? Yes. Can it be done? Absolutely. And my hunch is that you're doing some of these things already. And then lastly, in terms of a chunk of content or work, we're going to do a little application through the switch framework. hopefully folks were able to look at the little 8-minute video. I'm a geek. I think it's really fun. Okay. All right. Any parting words before lunchtime?
Dana, could you put the link to that video in the chat again, just in case people want to watch it while they're munching?
Absolutely. We shall do that. Okay. Lily, anything for the good of the order before we spin off?
No?
All right. We will see you back here at 12:30.
All right.
All right. Thing that I noticed was, Stephanie, when you were talking, both of you guys, right? And these are adaptive muscles. Notice a thing, name a thing, and try and normalize it. Like, oh, it's not normal that all these things come down, but normalizing the talking about it and also lifting up what the trade-offs are. If we continue to do this, then this will happen, right? If I treat this like a adaptive problem and because of the competing commitments, it takes a minute to do it, then whatever, like that's a risk, can't do that. So let me intentionally or do some measured leading here and think about the trade-offs. I might have to lean more into the technical right now, but I know it's adaptive. How do I marry these things to get to an end goal? Okay. So what I'd like to do, and thank you, Barb, for what's in the chat, a huge element in that issue is trust that requests that will be received in the manner in which they are intended. So trust is a huge thing, and that would be probably another 3 or 4 hours, right? As leaders, right? There's a trust framework. And what we know is we're either generating trust, maintaining trust, or we're repairing trust. And there are specific ways to do that. And there's a thing called, I don't know if you guys have done trust work, Lily, or not, but there's some, if people are interested in it, I can get you some resources with that. So what I want to do is take us to the next part of our journey together today. And you guys, earlier, you identified, a couple of challenges. You two just shared some challenges and what you might do. And any set of actions that you take, those are strategies, right? Strategies are a coherent set of actions aimed at a particular end, a particular thing, in this case, a change. When you're really moving in an adaptive way, you really want to, as a leader, one of your superpowers has to be the ability to read your system, read your environment, and know what that means for your strategy or your set of actions that you're going to employ or deploy. Okay. So Vanessa, if you could get us to the next slide. So this book, the one I held up, this blue book, The Practice of Adaptive Leadership, there's a lot of good stuff in this book, I promise. I feel like they should ask me to write a review of it. But 2 of the biggest quotes that I love in the book are on this slide because I think it is so true about reading your system. So I'm going to read these quotes to you guys. I know you're readers because readers are leaders and leaders are readers, but I'm going to be the reader right now. So reading the system, determining ripeness of an issue in the system is critical. An issue is ripe, meaning it's ready to be dealt with, when the urgency to deal with it has become generalized across the system. A strategy of intervention to ripen that is only localized, held by a few or a faction, is different from a strategy to deal with a ripe issue that is already generalized, meaning held widely by the system. Okay, if we can take the slide down. So why do you guys think that quote is so important? What is it saying, or those quotes? Determining the ripeness of an issue in the system is critical.
So I would say that, when we speak in terms of complex versus complicated, now there's a significant distinction. So complex means that everything has changed. Things can be complicated and some of the components remain the same. Complex, sometimes all things change. So when you're dealing in a complex environment, you need to be conscious of the contemporary environment that you're working in, which includes people, first and foremost. It includes circumstances. Most of the time it's budget. It could be laws, policies and things of that nature. So from an adaptive standpoint, you have to have the dexterity and be able to, at a rapid pace, make decisions, and the best decision that you can based on the data that you have, and you have to move forward. And you have to live with the results. The results are what they are, and then you have to move forward. Because let's be honest, this stuff is hard. So if you don't start from a mindset that this is going to be hard, then I think you're selling yourself short, because you don't recognize that you're actually in a complex environment and not a complicated environment. Big difference.
Very much so. So that whole piece, like on complexity theory, like if you're not into it, an invitation to get into it, particularly as the bigger landscape and ecosystem shifts and changes. This idea of ripeness, it is important because your work as an adaptive leader is to determine when a thing is ready to be dealt with, right? Knowing if it is ripe and ready. Have you ever been part of something? I don't care what it is. Maybe it is a friendship, or it's an exercise class or a gym class, and they're like, and now we're going to do such and such. And you're like, some people might, but I'm not ready for that yet, right? I'm not ready to lean into that yet. Think about a piece of fruit. If you have a peach or a nectarine, when do you want to bite into it? When it's really, really hard, or when you can sort of press on it and you can tell it's ripe and ready to actually bite into, to eat, right? It's the same with problems and challenges. When you are working to make change in a system, you want to make sure that the issue is ripe. That doesn't mean that everybody has to see it as an issue, but it has to be more than just a small group of localized people. I think, is it Kasha that was talking about the issue in her system, enrollment and student success, I think it was, and some of the agita and tension between the two. The question for me as a person that has her ear flaps attuned to the adaptive issues, my curiosity is from both sides. What does the other think is ripe? What is right for the pickings? Because if it's ripe and ready for both, that's one set of actions to take. If as an adaptive leader, your work is to ripen it, that's another set of actions to take. Okay. So for example, it's like providing or working toward a solution for a question that nobody has asked before. Right? That's sort of a waste of time for folks. So being able to read that system and knowing if you are stepping into something that is ripe and ready for the pickings, or if you are stepping into something where it is your adaptive work to help ripen the issue so that it will be ready for the picking. Okay? You guys see the difference between that? You step in and you think you're dealing with something that's ripe, and it's not. Hidden meat wall. Okay? Let's go to Vanessa, the slide about advancing adaptive work. Does that make sense to you guys? And everything that JC said about, like, as you're stepping in and you're reading that system, you've got to be taking in where the system is in the complicated to complex arc. All right, so if you've been listening and you're like, okay, awesome, got it. It's hard, and I've got some adaptive work to do, and I want to build my muscles as an adaptive leader. What are some things I can do? So we're going to walk through them. And what I'd like for you to do as we do this is to think about your gnarly problem, your problem that you focused on this morning. Maybe it is about how do I build a bridge between two different departments? How do I get people to not think about polarities? It's either this or that. It's this group wins or that group loses. Like, what is it and where is it that we can find a third way and hold the interest of both groups? Okay. So here are some things. In adaptive work, there is this thing that is called, I'm going to go through these on this slide, Vanessa, and then sort of delve more deeply and talk with folks about the next slide. So just keep me right here is the short version. There's a thing that's called getting on the balcony. Have folks ever heard that phrase before when you're dealing with a problem? Get on the balcony. So I see some heads, Barb and Sarah saying no. So let me tell you what that is. So in adaptive work, there is sort of this analogy that doing the work is like being on the dance floor as the doer and as the leader sort of going up to the balcony. Many of us live our lives on the dance floor. And the thing about the dance floor, being on the dance floor in the problem, is sometimes it's hard to see the problem. So the invitation is to get on the balcony, lift your leadership up, and take a balcony perspective so that you can see patterns in the problem. You can sort of distinguish and untangle yourself from the issue. You can pull apart the technical and adaptive. As a leader, you're not always on the balcony, right? You're often on the dance floor. And you want to do that so that you understand what's going on. But you also want to have this balcony perch that will allow you to read the system, figure out actors, look at motivation, what are interests, things of that nature, okay? The next is to think and act politically. Now, I know that that may conjure up some but just sort of stay with me. This really truly is little p political. And I only use this language because it comes out of the Heifetz Linsky work. But if you might indulge me to change the language, think about it more as think and act strategically. Okay, and we're going to delve into what that means, but it's really about intentionality. And we'll sort of get into that in a second. The third is orchestrate conflict. For many people, and we all have a relationship with conflict and how we hold conflict. And many people have a mental model that conflict, not so much, not me, conflict is bad. And when I'm saying conflict, I'm not saying go somewhere and be a horse's patootie and just, you know, stir the pot. I'm really talking about creating conflict in service of your aim or your result. Disrupting, little d, questioning. We talked about turning up the heat when the heat needs to be turned up, turning it down, sort of regulating it, right? Not choosing comfort over truth. And for many that can feel conflictual. There's a whole nother workshop around our orientation to conflict as leaders. And it's a good thing to know where you stand with that, okay? Giving the work back is exactly what it sounds like, right? Remember, in this frame, you don't have to be the expert. You are in it with other people. You are not the solver of all things good and you're wearing your solutions cape. You're engaging other people and being in relationship with them and having them own work, determine work, move work, make decisions. Giving the work back is one of the most powerful things that an adaptive leader can do, along with taking a balcony stance, I believe. And the reason that I say that is it is an invitation for folks to step into the work. I don't know about you guys, but have you ever been part of a team and you are leading the team and you have meetings and you walk out and guess who has all of the task? You never happened to you guys? You ever like, okay, I walked in with one thing and now I'm leaving with 16, right? How do you create space for others to be part of it? Someone earlier in the chat talked about delegation. And it's more than delegation. It really is. It's so simple as to be revolutionary, right? Many of us have made our bread and butter, bought our groceries, put a roof over our head by being the expert and the solver. And the question that is about to, that I'm about to ask may seem like, what? Why would I do that? But in meetings that you're leading and people say, hey, Amy, what do you think about such and such and such and so and so? Tell us what we should do. I think that's a great question. What are your thoughts about that? How might you all such and such? How might we together? Right? Folks ever tried that before? Intentionally? Most people get a little rocky with that or a little wobbly because we are in our roles because of our adroitness with things, our ability to solve, maybe our ability to engage, but engage as leader, okay? And then the last bullet here is about holding steady. The work of adaptive leadership is hard. People want, many systems want, let me back up, many systems want the person to come in and replace the fuse quickly, get it done. Even when they know it's not the fuse that needs to be replaced, it's the whole electric box. But we'll take a short-term fix over a long-term solution. What adaptive leadership is asking you to do or be positioned to do is in those places where it gets hard to be able to resource yourself, whether that's with others, or maybe there's something else that provides you resource to hold steady, right? To be able to help people tolerate loss, and to keep people anchored and aligned on the result. Yeah, I'm just reading the chat. Maggie says, I think some of it for me is control. I don't want to put too much on the team. Exactly. I'm with, so I'll just do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard. You know, again, it's like sometimes it's just quicker to do than to actually give that work back. Let's go to the next slide, Vanessa. So a lot of what I just touched on is on this slide. It'll be in the deck that you have, but it's little nuggets here. And what I want to do is just have you all, can you all see that slide pretty well? Yes, no? Okay. To just take a minute and just take it in as much as you can. I know it's a lot of words. Sort of give me a thumbs up when you feel like you've made it through the slide or taken in as much as you want to take in or care to take in right now. I see a thumbs up from Patty. Thank you. All right, Katie's good. Amanda, Amy. So by and large, we're good to talk. So, and wherever you get to, it's fine. You can sit with this, for sure, once you guys have the deck. I'm just curious, what pops for you? Usually when folks look at this slide and see some of the words that are on here, like their eyebrows sort of do the eyebrow up thing, or what does that mean? So I want to make sure that we have a chance to have that conversation. What's popping for you?
I like to listen to the song beneath the words because it makes me think to like look for the good. Sorry, Laura, if that's what you were going for too. Okay.
Okay.
I liked keep the opposition close because I often will invite people that I feel like are a little fussier or naysayers to be part of work groups. It's almost like inviting conflict, but I think that it actually helps get buy-in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot to be learned, right, from people who don't agree, or who are dissenters, and dissenters, that's very different than opposition, right? Opposition is no. Dissenters are, I'm not really sure. Let's think about this. Let's think about that. There's a chapter 10 in the book that I was showing you is all about thinking and acting strategically or politically, right? And the idea here is to really look for people's highest interest and what is bringing them to the table and how you might align and what you can align on and what things you will maybe never be aligned on, but what are your common interests? Okay. What else?
I was gonna say one thing I do in meetings, whenever we bring up different ideas or I like give input on something, I like to ask my team, okay, tell me why this won't work. Tell me what's wrong with it. So that way, because I get, sometimes the title carries a lot of weight to it. So trying to tell people, hey, this is not just me talking. So.
All right, hold on one second. We've got a lot of background noise, and Matt, I want to hear every word you said. All
Sure.
right.
So
Go
in
ahead.
meetings, whenever we bring up ideas or I bring up an idea specifically, I think it's a great idea and I'll tell people that, but then I'll be like, okay, why won't this work? Tell me where the pinch points are at, and you have full permission to tell me, no, this won't work and here's why. And our team we're gelled enough, we know each other well enough where they could be very candid with me. And I really appreciate that. And I try to let them know that because I've got blinders on sometimes with some of these things. But I try to give them permission to push back on things and let me know, okay, here's why that's not the best idea. And I recognize that there's a lot of weight in a title, and I want to be conscious of that. I don't want to just walk by, throw out some idea and have people be like, oh, well, he said we should, whatever, give away $15 pad folios to every student to come through the career fair. He said that would be a good idea. I didn't really mean it. I just said, hey, that might be cool if we could get there someday. It's just trying to let people know. And I do that not only with obviously our full-time staff, but also our student team as well. And I try to empower them to tell me where I'm messing up.
Very nice. So what I want to draw you all's attention to, Matt said, I ask them, right? Go to number 4, bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ask strategic questions. One of the most powerful tools a leader has, and particularly someone who is practicing adaptive leadership, are powerful questions, right? Strategic, we call them strategic long lever questions. Those are questions that are future focused, open-ended, curious, and allow folks to think outside the box, right? We all grew up we know the difference between an open question and a closed question. So think strategic questions open, not yes or no. Hey, folks, what would it take for us to develop a system that serves students and also met the needs of enrollment? How might we? Well, if we were sure we wouldn't fail, what would we do together? Right? So those kind of questions. As we're looking at this strategy, moving forward, what might be some pinch points? Right? So those questions and engaging others, they answer, and then we solve and create a future together. Anybody else on this slide before I ask you to apply some things that are on here?
I can see how this would work, from a, department standpoint and even a lateral colleague standpoint. I would have more problems with this myself, I guess, in my own skills, in using this for problems or projects that involve those higher up than me. Yeah, that I was just trying to kind of switch, instead of, Matt's version was like him and then his staff. But I'm trying to think of it of like me and those that I report to and those who they report to. Yeah, that's just
Amy, what's your concern about this? I just want to make sure that I understand and we have a moment to just work it through or work it.
yeah. I think only like the looking up, that's the only concern I have with it is that especially if you are in a position where you oversee people who are on the ground working, there's a big disconnection between, you know, staff members and those at the VP level. And being that person who's in the middle, it is so much harder to enact these types of things because you are trying to be the leader that your staff needs you to be, which may not be the leader that your boss or supervisor wants you to be. So I think that's the challenge, I guess maybe I'm experiencing as middle manager.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. And again, I think it looks great on paper and it's a practice.
Yeah.
And all things would not be implemented like, let's do all these things, right? But you will want to like test some things. Remember, we talked about testing and the change. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The position that you are describing, Amy, like being in the middle, again, there's a whole nother module on leading from the middle. I don't know if you guys have touched on that, but how hard that actually is. And being in the middle is an adaptive position, whether you want to be an adaptive leader or not. It takes that, right? Because you're managing up and you're managing more towards the front line or folks who are, you know, you are supervising. The people, the tops, have mental models about middle management, and folks who are below you have some mental models. And leaders who are middles can get crunched by both of those. And there are some things to consider with that as you do your work as well. I don't know if that helps, but I hear you. Yeah. All right. So folks, you all remember the problem that you identified at the top of our time together or near the top of our time together? And you wrote it down. It was, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 issues that you were wrestling with in role. You wrote those down. You identified whether it was technical or adaptive. You did a little noodling on and jotting down about what makes it adaptive or what makes it hybrid. What I'd like for you to do now is to really think about your own leadership, right? And if you were to practice adaptive leadership, what are some of the things, or maybe we'll just stick with one, as you look at this slide that you'd want to either practice, or maybe you're doing it, but you'd like to get a little bit better at it as you're thinking about your challenge, your adaptive challenge? Do you want to practice a little bit more getting on the balcony and out of the weeds, right? Finding out where people are about the issue. Is it ripe? Is it not? Get better at reading the authority figures. Do you want to practice thinking more strategically, not alone, with partners? right? Modeling that behavior. I love this piece, accepting your responsibility for the piece of the mess, right? How have you contributed to maybe things being perennial? Do you need to practice turning up the heat or lowering the heat or calling a thing, even though it might be tough and ignite a little conflict? Practice giving the work back. Right? Offering observations, asking those strategic questions, inviting people into the work. Might you need to get better at holding steady, right? Taking the heat or understanding, yeah, this is really a thing for me and mine, but it's not yet ripe for me to address. My work is actually in ripening the issue. Find ways to anchor yourself in what are now choppy waters. And have always been, but maybe more so now. Give you a minute to think about that. All right, we've got a couple of ways that we do this. One is in breakout groups. The other is we can do this full group. I am aware of the time and that I asked you to look at a video. And I hate it when people ask me to do things and then they don't do anything with it. So I don't want to do that to y'all. Okay. So we're going to try and have this conversation full group. You guys have been together. I know that you've got connections. So I want to invite you to sort of rest in that, lean into that, and to be open and vulnerable with each other. Okay. So as you think about your challenge, where do you want to lean in and practice?
I think for me, it'd be orchestrate the conflict. Sometimes that's hard for me to balance. Either there's so much conflict, I let it go on, or people, I think, what did you call it? The congenial conflict, or being very nice, but not really saying, I'm sorry.
Cordial hypocrisy.
Yes. So that's one of the things that I know I need to work on a little bit more. One of my issues is we're going up for a SAC COC next year. And so we need to make sure all our online classes are equal and compatible to face-to-face. And we haven't really developed a process for reviewing all those classes. And as you can imagine, reviewing faculty courses has a lot of things and emotions that go with it. So kind of balancing both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And knowing that there will be loss, right? Just in review, people can feel some type of way, as folks say. Okay. How about others? What's a practice place for you? Or a place of consideration?
I think have trouble with the hold steady part because I don't want the issue to ripen. I want it to be done. So, you know, I think for me, I tend to like just want to try to get it done. Let's just, you know, as you said earlier, doer, let's just get it done as opposed to like letting it try to work itself out a little bit more.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sandra. So here's the thing, that hold steady doesn't mean, okay, it's out there, let's just wait. It really is speaking more to you as leader, right? Like you in your being and you in your role, not being tossed about by the tide, but really holding steady. And it doesn't mean taking the heat and like people are coming for you and you're like, okay, I'll be your SpongeBob punching bag or what have you, right? It's really like, how do you, it's really speaking more to resilience as a leader, right? And having agency to push an issue in terms of it ripening. It's not just like let it hang on the tree and ripen. It's like, okay, how do I nurture this and help it ripen? And that's hard work. And it can feel a little bit like, you know, you're taking some bruising there. So it's really just you in your stance and your leadership resilience. Hold steady, anchor yourself. And that's a hard thing to do. You know, I know sometimes I just want to rail. How about others? Let's hear from one more. You could be the person that moves us on.
I'll go. We need to do a better job finding partners. I need to do a better job finding partners. We know our lane, we know our area of expertise really, really well, but it feels like sometimes I'm a little too possessive, I guess. I'm great sharing things with my team, but as far as outside the office, I don't mean to be a silo. We all hate that term, but sometimes I do it to ourselves. So it'd be good to find more strategic partners right next door.
Very nice. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, the partner thing can be super tough, right? Because you don't just want partners, you want productive partnerships, right? People that you can work in high action and high alignment with toward a particular end.
Well, I've been burned in the past too, not so much here, but my other institution, as we say, talk is cheap. People are really eager to, oh, I'll help out. Yeah, we can totally do that thing. And then they don't show up. And so it's like, okay, fine. And that's just human nature, I guess. But that's something I have to get over.
Yeah.
Matt,
and yet the thing still needs to be done.
Matt, the
Yes.
secret I found is find a faculty member that researches it and show them research opportunities with it. And some of my favorite partnerships have come from that, where I'm working on this project. I noticed that you have research in this area. Would you be willing to work with me? And they're all over it. And they're experts all over our campuses. And they seem to welcome those kinds of opportunities to collaborate with the student affairs, student success side of things.
I love that idea. That's something I'll do like as I'm preparing to meet a faculty member, maybe for the first time or I'm not familiar. I will what I lovingly call strategically stalk them, and I see, okay, what was their dissertation about? What do they research? Because I know that's their world, and that kind of can help kind of open up the door a little bit. But I never thought about it from that side. That's a great idea. I appreciate that.
Very nice. That is a very nice example of thinking and acting strategically. Very cool. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Matt. All right. Vanessa, if you could take the slides down and let's just look at each other. Okay. Y'all, look across the Zoomiverse. Look at all the folks that are working with you, alongside you. Thank you, Stephanie. We see the hands to make change. And you guys are working to make change even when change is hard. True story? Right? Nobody has said, you know, mic drop, I'm out. It's too hard. I believe I'm correct. You wouldn't be here. So we asked you if you could, we're going to just switch a little bit in these last moments together to take a look at the 8-minute switch video. It is the short video that talks about Dan Heath, the Heath brothers book Switch. How many folks have read the Switch book before? Anybody? This is my Ferris Bueller voice. Anybody? Anybody? Okay. That is okay. I would put it on my read list. It's called Switch, and it's by the Heath brothers. And it is now an oldie but goodie. But again, I love this book. Why? Because you can use the practices on Tuesday, okay? Like they are very accessible and an interesting way to think about making change or creating a culture of change. We're not going to go into it very, very deeply, but I did not want to not touch on this while we were all together. So totally get, like, the world has been completely busy, and I'll talk about competing commitments. I know that they are real and true. My expectation is that some folks got to watch the video and some folks didn't, and whichever one is absolutely there, because, you know, I would say YouTube's not going anywhere, but you know, you never know now. But as of today, we still have YouTube and the link is still good, okay? So for folks who were able to watch the video, what popped for you? What were your big takeaways?
I was just gonna mention just reminding the emotion piece of it all, right? Like, just centering that we all bring emotions to all the situations. And so when we're trying to lead through a situation, being cognizant of others' emotions and bringing safety and space for that, as well as our own, whether with the hold steady or the, inviting conflict pieces too, like the emotions piece is resonating with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with Switch, they were, I wonder why we're riding elephants and not horses and llamas or something. I know, why not horses? We're in Kentucky. But the Heath brothers are not. So they have 3 big components: direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. Okay. Those that were able to watch or hear the video, what was maybe a takeaway from the direct the rider? The rider is like the logical part of colleagues and change makers. Yeah, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
I related to like Brene Brown saying clear is kind, and like making sure like our expectations are communicated and not operating on assumptions. And so, directing the rider means like what are we asking? What do we want? What needs to be solved? Are we talking about the same problem even? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vanessa, if you could just throw the switch slide up, and I'm going to just walk you through it a little bit and then ask you to really think about some of the work that you all are trying to do, because it is gnarly and it is full of adaptive issues, power pieces, and it requires both the logical kinds of arguments, the more emotional types of interventions, and then being really clear about what the destination is. So with the Heath brothers and Switch, they talk about these three components, right? Direct the rider, and the rider is our logical side. But what they share with us is that when you think about the rider and the elephant combo, like look at it on that slide. What's the scale between the two, the rider and the elephant? The elephant is much bigger, right? And what they are basically saying to us is that a lot of folks that there are some folks that will take in the logic of it, and that will be the thing that motivates them to change, right? And what they posit is that each of us has a rational rider side and an emotional elephant side, if you will. And that as change leaders, we have to reach both of those sides. Okay? And they give us some ideas or some ways to think about how you direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. Okay? So what they are saying to us is that we're directing the rider, speaking to the rational side. There are things as a leader you can do as you are promoting change. Again, some of this you are already doing, some of it is intuitive. We want to bring it to the forefront, and there may be places that you want to double down. So one way to direct the rider, speak to the rational side, the logic piece of a person, is to follow the bright spots. And that really is about looking for what's already working and amplifying it, scripting the critical moves, making sure that people have really a crystal clear direction. Again, they may see the destination and that may feel way too far off in the distance, but what are the critical moves that you can make together? Oftentimes we call that, or you may have heard it referred to as chunking the change. Okay. The rider wants to be pointed to the destination. Right? People who are really motivated on the rider side, they want to know where they might be going before they even start the journey. So in a change environment, if there's a lot of change being pushed, or it seems vague or hazy or not transparent, to the extent you can, you really want to point to the compelling destination and speak to them in that way. Make sense? Be that a partner, right? Why would I want to partner with you? Where are we going? What are we going to do? What's it going to take to get there? How, when, where has this worked before? Motivate the elephant is more the emotional side. When you're motivating the elephant, you want to find the feeling, right? People are rarely motivated, believe it or not, by information. It's emotion that motivates the elephant. So tapping into the feeling, you want to shrink the change. The elephant, if you will, can get spooked by a lot of change. So here you want to break it down into the chunks and the pieces, right? You've scripted the critical moves. You may even need to break those down. so as not to be overbearing or spook the elephant. To motivate the elephant, you want to grow your people, really cultivate a sense of identity and instill a growth mindset, which, by the way, includes accepting failure. That's usually a hard pill for people to swallow. Like, what? I got to do what? I got to accept failure. Create spaces and places that allow people to innovate and try some things and fall short, without marrying that to a culture of fear. And that's a hard thing to do in big systems, right? Again, easy on paper, a little harder in person. The last piece is to shape the path, right? So you want to tweak the environment, right? Create like 1,000 tiny ways to make the right behavior easy. If you were to read the book, they would talk about, which is hard to believe, mind-blowing actually, but I'm old enough to remember, when in doctors' offices and hospital rooms, there wasn't the little, hand sanitizer machine on the wall. I don't know if other folks remember that, but there were the signs that said, please wash your hands. And there were studies done, which is gonna like totally gross you out, where what folks learned was actually nurses and doctors were not washing their hands. Either there wasn't a sink in the room, or they were ripping and running to the next thing and they were like, okay. So what they did was they tweaked the environment to make the behavior that was wanted the easy behavior. So is it easier to, as you're walking out the door, hit the dispenser, or is it easier to stop, wash your hands, lather up, or go out towards the nurse's station? Well, it's easier to hit the dispenser. And what they found were more medical professionals were cleansing their hands. There, fewer infections, like all the things one would expect. But that's what they mean by tweaking the environment, making the desired behavior the easy behavior, right? A lot of people who might be on diets, one of the things that we say, because I'm one of those humans, it's just so much easier if I run through, pick a fast food place and I get a burger. It's hard for me to drive and eat a salad, right? How do you tweak the environment? How do you all tweak the environment with your given challenge to make the preferred behavior or the preferred outcome easier to accomplish? Shaping the path also includes building habits, rituals, things that people can depend on. You want to have processes that people know, understand, can easily access, and they can rest on those, right? They have these expectations that, the way you do a thing is standard. When things are in flux, particularly think about right now, and things feel wobbly to people or super shaky, people want you and systems to build habits that provide some comfort, right? Something known. And then lastly, in shaping the path, there's this thing that's called rallying the herd. Here's what we know. And you may have said it to people in a different way, but emotions are contagious, right? Behaviors are contagious. You ever been having a great day and bad luck schleprock comes in with the black cloud over his head, and all of a sudden you have no idea why you feel in some type of way, but it's not great anymore. And conversely, you might be having a bad day and someone comes in and they smile or they're sunshiny or what have you, and you start to feel a different kind of way. Those things, we say those things are contagious. Well, guess what? Practices and behavior in our systems and in our departments are contagious too. But they have to be visible. Like people have to see them. So the idea here is to spotlight people who are leading the work and leading the change effort, not in a way that sets them on a pedestal, but to notice that habit. And what we find is that that helps us rally the herd, right? To get that behavior to catch in a system, okay? So that's probably a 16 chapter book in maybe 9 minutes, I think. And what I would love to do is just like hear from you guys, especially if you've had a chance to listen to the video. How does it resonate, if at all? Speaking to the rational side of people, the emotional side, and then this clarity about where we're going together.
Well, I do like what you pointed out before, that the elephant's bigger than the rider, right? Feelings are often bigger than our rational responses to things. Our emotional response tends to drive more of our actions, perhaps, than our rational responses. So I think that's interesting. It's like the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So how do you deal with where people live and not just where we want them to be?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Beth. All right. Vanessa, can you switch the slide and then we're going to come back? All right. So when we go back to the slides, and we won't stay there long, but I do want you to know what you have. You have a, what do we call those? Is it a Crip Notes? College was 30 some years. What do we call them? Like the little notes? Cliff Notes. Thank you. So you'll have some Cliff Notes. Thank you for saving me. On switch and the different principles. Here is, thank you, Cliff Notes, Spark Notes, cheat sheets. Yeah, I was going to go with cheat sheets. And then I was like, oh, well, I don't want a negative connotation when I say cheat. But you guys will have, I'm just going to call them notes on the switch principles. Please, if you get a minute in your spare time, laugh out loud, to really dig into that video or to the book. They have like a 17-minute video also. It is worth it. It is worth it. There are principles that if you think about the problem, the challenge that you brought in this morning, I bet that you all could attach to it what it is you need to do, right? Do you need to direct the rider? Do you need to motivate the elephant? Do you need to shape the path? Adaptive leaders are always thinking these kinds of ways. They may not talk about riders and elephants and paths, oh my, but they are talking about logic and emotion and loss and clarity. This framework is, again, something you can use on Tuesday, can give you something to practice with your problem. Hey, our student services and enrollment don't dance so well together. Are there bright spots out there that maybe I could point to? how could I chunk the change? They probably aren't going to be best friends overnight. But if I were to say relationship wise on a scale of 1 to 5, like bridging and working generatively, we're at a 1.5. What would it look like to be at a 2.5? What would signal that? What would be some intentional things that I would have? That's chunking the change, right? And then what would it take to get there? That's scripting the critical moves, okay? This making sense to you guys? So play with it. If there's a brave soul that is out there, and I believe all of you are brave, as you think about, again, the problem you brought in this morning, what, if anything, pops for you as a switch practice that seems to be ripe and ready that you could just play with? Let's put the switch principles up, Vanessa, so they can see. That would probably be helpful. Sorry about that. My bad. And I would invite you not to get lost in the black text, but really the top. Do I need to direct the rider, motivate the elephant, shape the path? If I'm directing the elephant, would it be helpful if I've pointed to some bright spots or followed them? Do I need to get clear on the destination, make it compelling? I need to motivate the elephant, not spook him, and shrink the change. Shape the path. How do I build in habits, make the desired behavior easier? Let's just hear from 1 or 2 people, and then we're gonna move to close. And just come off mute and blurt, blurt, blurt.
I think for me, where my team is currently, it's, as we've been talking about this all day, I've kind of been like, I need to capture this and bring it to them because we are in a state of, we've had a lot of change this year. It was necessary change and needed change after I came into the role in the department back in June. And people are very willing to identify the change, but not necessarily. We're kind of in a space where people need to start identifying their role within the reason for needed change. And that's a bit of a struggle. It's tough to take a look in the mirror and recognize that your emotions have come into this and your emotions have driven decision-making processes prior that are now impacting you in the current. And so I'm trying to like wrap my head around synthesizing this for my people so that we can hopefully bring them to a space of like, it's okay and there's a road out of this to continue the change that we have identified and want to create, is kind of where I'm sitting with this right now. And I think that's part of building habits within this overall role.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate you sharing that. Maybe 1 or 2 more folks quickly. I know you've got some announcements before we spin off. I'm going to read the room. Vanessa, can you take the switch principles down? We're not going to do the switch principles. What we're going to do is we're going to move to checkout. And what I would love to do is everybody doesn't have to go, but just maybe one thing, a reflection on today, and it does not have to be great, right? Oh my God, switch was a bridge too far. Not so much the feedback, but a reflection. Man, this was helpful. I'm taking this away. Maybe this was a bridge too far, whatever it is, but just a little bit so the Vanessa and I know. And, I want to make sure that you got what you were picking up what we were putting down, as the young people say. Right. So any reflections or takeaways to share? We're going to do that for about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to yield to Lily.
I really liked that clear is kind and the importance of their very specific communication, because I'm assuming one of the things that would help would put in a bit more of the logic piece and help tap down more the emotional piece by providing a bit more, groundedness when I'm talking about change and developing new projects. I haven't been doing that as well.
Thank you, Patty. Any other reflections or takeaways from today?
I like the reminder to go to the balcony and continue your, pulling out and hoping to bring more people in that. I tend to be a systems level thinker, but I don't always bring people along into that thinking. And so to remember that, and I think just that analogy is really helpful.
I just wanted to add that I also really appreciate our conversation today. It is not exactly what I was expecting, but I think it was absolutely what we all needed. And I noticed, having attended almost all of our sessions now, that we had so much engagement from like a very wide like a wide group of our folks. Like, different people were chiming in through different questions, reflections, and in the chat. So I think that, yes, Dana, what you're putting down definitely resonates with us. And it was great to hold space for it. And the pacing was great. And it was also very responsive, right, to our needs and what was top of mind for us. So feels therapeutic on a level. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome, awesome. I want to give space for Lily to wrap us up and share. Again, The Practice of Adaptive Leadership, super good, great book. Switch, and there are some other tools on trust and partnering and, working in aligned action with unusual actors, quite frankly. And I'm happy to provide any and all of those resources as asked or needed. Okay. Thank you, guys. Vanessa and I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dana and Vanessa. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're very, very eager. Oh, go ahead, Barb.
I was just gonna say thank you so much. I really gained a lot from this, even though I don't verbalize it a lot. But I wanted to ask if you had a recommendation of either of those books, The Adaptive Leadership or The Switch, which would you go to first?
I would go to The Practice of Adaptive Leadership first. It's getting a little long in the tooth in terms of age, but I still think that the examples and the plain language are super helpful.
Thanks, Dana. So we will definitely follow up with the recording from today, as well as the resources and tools that Dana has referenced, sharing just quickly, and then I'm going to pass it to Stephanie to have a few notes on the capstones. But our final session is March 26th, and that's kind of our final module, or like time together in large group, before we break into our capstone projects. And that one is going to really be a recap of the 5 topics that we've had, and we'll bring back out all those tools that we talked about from the various sessions and presenters, and try to think creatively about how they can help us and assist us as we go into our capstone projects. So really excited for that last session. It's going to be a really good recapping day and reflective day. And then we will also have a lot of time in that session to work together as our teams on our capstones, kind of getting those kicked off. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie, and then we'll get you out of here before 2.
Thanks so much, Lily. I see that we're coming up real close to 2, so I'm thinking maybe I'll just attach the slideshow rather than flip through it. But we'll see how much time we got here.
I can stay on if you've got time. I don't know if everybody else is flexible, but
Yeah, I had planned for just about 10 or so minutes, but if you need to head out, of course, feel free to do so. I've just got a few slides I wanted to share with you. Now, is that showing up full screen for folks okay? Or
I see the
away?
presenter view.
Okay, so I'll have to just flip that. Okay, how are we doing now?
It has not changed.
Probably because I have 3 different screens, which doesn't help. Okay, let me unplug that. Okay. All right, are we full screen now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. A little bit. I'm just going to share a few quick updates and announcements about where we're at with our Leadership Exchange capstone projects. So for those of you who were able to make it to the summit pre-convening, you are already, okay, I don't know if the slides are blinking for you. I didn't set it up that way, but you're already familiar with what we've done. If you missed out on the pre-convening or you weren't able to attend, just as a quick recap, we had some team icebreakers. We looked at our capstone roadmap, right? Starting from, of course, building team rapport, moving through the creation of our aim statements and what's coming up next in our 4 months or so of working together. We then concretized some ideas around our aim statements, working in our groups, which were determined based on the project sign-up sheet we have on Teams. And then we engaged in a room tour and feedback activity. So we had our aim statements laid out for each group, at least a working draft of them. And we were able to walk around, share some feedback, where to be perhaps more specific, what aspects of aim statements we really like or where we think there's a lot of good energy around, and provide that feedback to other groups. Ultimately, we also shared some project templates, and we had a memory jar activity, which is just where I asked folks to share some of their thoughts anonymously on things that they're really eager to take away from the Leadership Exchange to date, things that they reflect fondly upon, and then also some challenges, or as Dana mentioned today, things we're still wrestling with, things we need additional support around, some constructive feedback for how to adapt the Leadership Exchange moving into the next cohort. So that kind of rounded out our 3 hours together nicely. And just as a visual for where we started and where we've gotten now, right? Remember, the Leadership Exchange did start in September, and you're all part of this inaugural cohort. You'll recall that through our emails, Lily and I had invited you to sign up for a group project topic. And so we have that sign up sheet on our Leadership Exchange Teams, right? At the pre-convening, we looked at creating those draft aim statements. And then ultimately, here's where we landed at the end of our pre-convening, with groups now having concretized their idea around what they would like to tackle. And as you can see here, a lot of reactions, the elephant, right? The emotions, as well as some rational or maybe more logical feedback in the way of sticky notes. So that's the recap for you there. I also wanted to note, though, however, we did receive some questions, right? In terms of how we can better support groups towards their next steps. So one of the questions I wanted to address, and again, I'll just do this briefly and I'll share the slides with you all, is how to make a project the right scope, right? How do we know it's not too big and not too small? So you'll see on the screen there, I shared some examples of different ways to think about project scope, right? What's manageable within a 4-month timeline, whether necessary resources can be mobilized, whether, you know, your project has good potential without overwhelming the team. But of course, you may have some other ideas as well. Now, you'll see on the right-hand side, and this is linked in the slide deck as well, that I've provided an example to some of the NASH-NIC projects. So this, if you think back to Juliet Price's session, which I think was just the one before this one, or just before the summit, right? Juliet spent a lot of time talking to us about how to create sustainable and scalable change. And that often that happens in very, you know, small chunks, right? Chunking the change. We don't go from, well, sometimes we might try to, right? With a New Year's resolution, not a lot of physical activity, to becoming a workout buff overnight, right? We might start with a walk during lunchtime. So what does this mean in terms of our projects that we're looking to design, execute, and evaluate? Well, I did take a screenshot for you here just to make it a little bit easier for you to find. There are some great examples from NASH-NIC about small tests of change, right? So you'll see that there's a reference there to a test of change that affected 11 summer to fall transfer students, right? Something that's small in scope, but that can be scaled over time. If you were present at Juliet's session, she also talked about a good test for whether the scope is too big or too small is, can you afford to personally take all those students or staff impacted by your test of change out for coffee, right? And that was a funny, but also very realistic way of saying, you know, if something were to go wrong, this is how you can learn from failure or move forward from failure without kind of bringing the whole system down to its knees, right? Here's where you can learn, bounce back, apologize, or reach out, and do better once you know better. So I hope some of that is helpful to you all. Again, had we had additional time today, I would have loved to invite you to share your thoughts as well. Or if you do have a chance or a little bit of time this afternoon, you can feel free to stay on the call. Another question that I think we've heard is, should I be a host institution, or how do I know if I'm a good fit for a host institution? So again, I put some ideas or prompts for you to reflect on. You may want to think about whether your existing campus energy aligns well with project goals, right? Maybe you have capacity for participation and you have a lot of interest, but when you think about team who may be helping you with managing that memorandum of understanding or supporting with the budget accountability, right? Perhaps it's a busy time for other folks on campus right now, right? So is there that institutional readiness for change, which I know Dana spoke to us about today as well? Right? Have you identified campus partners? Is it a location where the capstone project team can visit, right? If that is of interest to you. Again, some are more important than others, right? I'm not saying if you're not central in Kentucky, you're not a good host institution. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's some things that you may want to reflect on as you communicate with your group members. Again, here, you can take a look at that meme on your own. It was shared to me from a close colleague, and it's something Matt touched on earlier today, right? Matt Purdy spoke about this too, that actions speak louder than words. So what I hope for all of you all, my encouragement and my kind of, not warning, but my caution to you all too, is to be mindful of a little bit more responsibility that a host institution might take on, and also the communication that's necessary to make sure folks are aware of different roles and who's going to be responsible for what, right? Of course, we don't want folks feeling like the host institution is carrying the weight of all the implementation and other folks are just advising, right? What is that right mix and balance for all of you so that you get what you need out of this project as well? There's value added for the host institution, and we're getting to apply and continue to learn from our leadership exchange sessions. All right, so that's pretty much it. In terms of some next steps, I created a little visual here with the upcoming couple of months. Lily and I will be summarizing these next steps in an email coming to you shortly, but we are asking you to identify and really solidify your project groups by March 26th. That date also coincides with our last leadership exchange session together. So that's session number 6. That's the next one is our last one. So we are kind of coming up to a close here. And then we're going to ask you to check in with us in your groups, right? So hopefully between April 2nd to 15th, you've now, right, identified your project groups, you've completed your aim statement, or you've updated your aim statement from with consideration to feedback that you've received. You know who your host institution is. And if you have the chance, right, I would encourage you to take a look at the project outline, which will also help to guide you towards next steps. So project outline, which everything is on the Teams, and we'll link you there as well. But it'll ask you, you know, who are those key stakeholders on your campus? What does success look like to you, right? What are you thinking in terms of your budget and some things that you might want to purchase or arrange for your test of change? And all of that will lead up to our first coaching session, which takes place on April 16th. And that's where we'll have various members of our folks who facilitated sessions in the past, Jack Hess, I'm not going to pop quiz myself, Julia Price, right? Come back to give us coaching and feedback on our project ideas and our implementation plans so far. And that's why we're asking you to do a little bit of work in those 3 or so weeks, right, in early April, so that you have something to share back in that community of practice as well. So finally, in April or on April 30th or by April 30th, we would like to have all those MOAs, Memorandum of Agreement, signed with host institutions, which will again help us to facilitate the project moving into the next few months. And then we're working up to capstone showcases and graduation in August, I think, right? So that really rounds out our year as the inaugural cohort in the exchange. That's pretty much it for me.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'll
Thank you,
pass it back to
Stephanie.
you.
Perfect. Okay, well, we'll post all of this information and share it out with everyone. Thank you again, Dana and Vanessa, and everyone for their wonderful participation. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you
Take
all.
care.